Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's a pretty simple to do card. I'm using this new set I got from Pink and Maine. It's called Fall Bouquets. I was looking for something that had kind of some border flowers that I could color. I wanted to show you quickly the watercolor paper I use. This is the Canson XL Mixed Media. It's a thin watercolor paper, but it's bright white, and that's what I love about it. So I'm going to stamp this border flower with some VersaFine Black Onyx ink using my Misty here, and I'm going to put it right at the bottom so that it barely goes over the edge. And I'm going to sprinkle it with some clear embossing powder and heat it to set it. And it's much easier, I find, to watercolor with an embossed image. So today I'm using my distress markers, which are really easy to use for watercoloring. I haven't used them for that in a while. I also have an aqua painter, which comes in a 2-pack from Stampin' Up. That's the brand I have. And then of course a tissue that I always have handy for removing some of the color when it's starting to get a little bit too dark. Alright, so I'm going to start with some seedless preserves, and I'm coloring direct to paper, and I'm coloring in the shadow areas, and I'm not putting too much color down, and you can see I did the whole inside of the flower, and I'm doing just kind of these little insets here for the back layer of petals. And then I'm going to take my aqua painter and I'm going to start in the white area and go to the color, and then I'll pull out a little bit of the color, but not too much because we're really dealing with some small areas here. So if you spend too much time brushing, you will end up with all one color on the whole petal. So the idea is you want to leave a little bit of a dark area at the very bottom where I placed the marker to begin with, direct to paper, and just pull out a little bit, but you want it to be really light at the end of the petal. And this will give you a variation so that it looks a little bit more realistic than if you colored the whole thing with one shade. I really like distress markers for beginners because they're really easy and forgiving, and you can put the color directly where you want it first, so you have a little bit more predictability on where your color is. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more of seedless preserves down here, and I'm basically using this same technique with all the different colors that I'm going to use. I tried to stick with the fall shades, so purple, red, orange, and green, just to keep this more of a fall card. Okay, so far I've used just one color in each area. Now I'm moving to 2. For these petals, I'm using Festive Berries at the base, so this is direct to paper at the bottom. And then at the top, I'm going to put Abandoned Coral. And notice that I'm really not going to meet the 2 colors, just a little tiny bit on the edge maybe. But I'm leaving a giant white area in the middle. And then I'll start with my aqua painter in the middle, and I'll kind of go back and forth, but I'm going to frequently get rid of the color on this tissue so that I make sure that I keep an area where the 2 colors meet in the middle a little bit more faded. And that's going to make these flowers look a little more interesting and dimensional as well. I'm also going to use 2 colors on the center of this first flower that I did. I have Carved Pumpkin on the left, kind of semicircle, and then Squeezed Lemonade on the right, and you can see they meet a little bit on the edge. And again, I'm going to start in the middle and kind of move back and forth, and you really want to make sure that you remove the color from your brush so that you leave a little bit of a faded area in the center. I'm going to speed up the rest of this watercoloring. I'll have all the colors listed in the blog post. If you don't have distress markers, you could take your distress ink pads, put a little bit on your craft mat, and then pick it up with your aqua painter or your water brush. You could also use a small paintbrush, make sure it's really small, and a glass of water if you want to do that as well. You could also use the Zig watercolor pens, although they're a little bit more potent in their color, so when you lay down the color, you'll have to be really careful not so that it doesn't spread too quickly to the rest of the flower. The last thing I'm going to watercolor here are these leaves underneath, and I'm using 3 different colors of green. I have pine needles here, and you can see I'm randomly coloring it in. Then I have some mowed lawn and some twisted citron, and I did all my application of color randomly, and then I'm taking my aqua painter and just spreading it around a little bit. You could also add, you can see I'm adding a little bit more pine needles because I felt like I didn't get enough of the darker color, and spread that out. So you could do that while it's still wet. I kind of was not too happy with the randomness of that leaf, and so when I'm doing the next one, after I finish these little bitty ones here, I'm going to color the veins with the pine needles, and then I'm going to cover the just a little bit outside of that with the mowed lawn and then the twisted citron. And I like the way this came out much better than the first one. And again, you really want to focus on just a little bit of brushing, because the more you brush, the more these colors are going to blend and look just like one color. For the rest of these small areas, I just took the fine tip of several of these markers and just colored them in directly. It's going to be really hard to watercolor these little areas because I'm going to easily go out of the lines, so I just colored them directly. And that's it for coloring my flower bouquet. Now I'm going to create a frame by hand with this Micron 03 pen. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch in from each side, and I'm drawing a line freehand, and I'm doing it behind this flower bouquet. So this is kind of the hardest side to do. And then I'll stop about 1/4 of an inch from the edge and finish it off. And you can see I'm purposely actually making this a little bit swerved. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to add a second line, and I want them to kind of cross in different areas. So again, just kind of going through behind all these. This one's a little bit tricky, so I'm just drawing a line right next to that original line. And then you can see I'm sort of swerving back and forth so that my lines cross, and it looks sort of like a sketchy hand-drawn frame. I'm going to add some color to this frame, but first I'm going to stamp my sentiment with some VersaFine black onyx ink. And I'm leaving quite a bit of white space above the flower bouquet, which made me extremely uncomfortable, but I think in the end it looks really good because it keeps the focus on the bouquet. All right, I have mowed lawn here, and I am drawing a line outside my drawn lines with the Micron marker. And I'm making sure that I stay on the outermost line. So I have 2 lines. I'm just making sure, even when they cross, I'm just staying on the edge of the outermost line. And I'm really not worried too much about thick or thin, because I'm going to be blending this out with my aqua painter, and it'll all sort of even out in the end. Okay, so here's the aqua painter. I'm starting in the white area, and then I move to the color, and then I'm going up and down. I'm not going side to side. I'm not trying to move the color out to the edge, because I want to keep my edge mostly white, and the color is automatically going to come out because the paper's wet. So just by it coming out by itself is plenty enough color to come out, and the very edge should be almost white, so it just sort of fades out to white. And I was just really careful behind those flowers to make sure I stayed outside of the flower line so I wouldn't reactivate that distress ink. And that is the frame. So then I'm going to add some ATG tape runner to the back of this panel and adhere it to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch Nina Solar white card base. So my frame is my frame, so I'm not matting this to anything. It's just a 1-layer card. And that will do it. So as I said, I was a little uncomfortable with all this white space, and when I showed it to Courtney, she's like, "Mom, I think you need something at the top." I'm like, "No, we're not going to add anything else. We're just going to leave it as is." And I actually really do like it. Anyway, I hope you do, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.